Welcome to Aliens versus Predator, a limited review show where we'll be reviewing every single film in the Alien and Predator franchise. I am one of your hosts, Chris Waterman from Jacksonville, Florida, joined this evening by Mr. George Arevalo from Miami, Florida.
What up? What up?
We've got Mr. Adam Gumbert from Lexington, Kentucky.
Hey, what's going on? Double Y chromosome right here.
A little shout out to the movie. And maybe Bobby Miller, who is holding over from our ECG podcast earlier. We're not really sure, but we'll see if he pops in. He is our wild card for sure, likes to keep us on our toes. On today's episode, we will be talking Alien 3. That's right, Alien 3 from 1992. Specifically reviewing the special edition or assembly cut as it's known, slightly longer recut version, as close to the David Fincher's original vision as the studio could make after the fact. As always, let's kick it off with a bit of trivia. So speaking of studio versions and director's cuts, David Fincher has famously disowned this film due to studio interference and essentially having no say on the final cut. Was, according to him, fired 3 times from the production, had to fight for every single thing. No one hated it more than me, and to this day, no one hates that movie more than me, he says. That's how he felt about the film. So he considered working on the assembly cut that we watched, but decided against it and gave supervising producer Charles de, I'm going to butcher this last name, Charles de Lazarica, his blessing, and said that don't call it the director's cut, but go for it, get it as close as you can to what we originally went for. So very troubled production. He was a first-time feature director coming off of music videos to shoot this movie. Some other interesting little tidbits. Michael Biehn, who played Hicks in Aliens, was famously paid as much for his brief likeness use in this film as he was for the entirety of being in Aliens, with a speaking and acting role on set, and kind of helped set a precedent for using Hollywood actors' likenesses in films and being compensated for that. Final bit of trivia: Sigourney Weaver famously shaved her head for this film and had a clause in her contract that if she were to have to shave her head again for reshoots, she would be compensated accordingly, or they could try to use basically a what do you call it? A bald cap. And apparently the bald cap didn't look good, so they had to pay her to shave her head twice because her hair had started to grow back out. So let's jump in now with some general impressions. I'm going to go first because this is a film that for probably the better part of 10 years, I've really championed as especially watching this cut. I don't think it gets the credit it deserves. I don't think it's an Alien. I don't think it's an Aliens. Not to spoil potential future rankings, but I think this movie's way better than it gets credit for, and I'm glad to see that in probably the last 10 or 15 years it's kind of risen in stature. People have kind of come back and taken the second look, because I think it's gorgeous. Number one, I think it has some of the most stunning visuals in any of the Alien movies. It has a very distinct style, and I think it takes a lot of chances, which is something that sequels don't often do, especially in cinema. Sequels tend to play it safe, be derivative, and you can't say that about this movie. It definitely does not play it safe and is not derivative. I love that, as much as it was probably disappointing in the time, that you kill off all of these people and Ripley's alone, again, right at the beginning of the movie. I think that's a very bold choice to kind of set the narrative pace. But I certainly don't think this movie is perfect. I think it has its problems. There are still, even in the director or the assembly cut, some apparent, very apparent pacing problems and some jumbled plot points. You can kind of see the results of the studio interference and kind of the clash of visions. But I think when it works really well. How about you fellas? Either one can go next. What are your general impressions?
George always goes first, so.
All right.
I thought the movie was fine. I don't think it's as good as Alien and Aliens, right? 1 and 2. But I thought it was fine. I don't see what when it kind of why there would be such a negative perception. I think it's just a another installment. I don't think it does anything amazing. I don't think it does anything poorly. Um, I don't know. Obviously, some stuff is going to come out in the next couple of movies if this was intended to be the end. In some ways, it caps it off well. In some ways, it doesn't. It was a little exhausting to introduce yet another group of characters, and it does lack a little bit of continuity. Besides, from her, you see her losing the little girl. I think is rough. It has obviously a big impact on her, but it's like, damn, like Ripley just keeps failing, right? And kind of what I probably my biggest issue with it, which we talked about before, is that like her character is built on being so strong and so driven that there's a point where she kind of like falls apart and just shows some weakness. And you could say she's being human, but it just didn't seem like appropriate, particularly when she wants to basically kill herself, but then is basically asking someone else to do it, like it just, I don't know, it didn't seem like in line with her character. She seemed to take charge more of the situation, and she does rebound and get it together towards the end of the movie, I think. But yeah, her character suffers a little bit in terms of how it was perceived. That I don't think is entirely consistent, but it was good, man. The movie was fine.
Yeah, I think like to the point about the character, one of my favorite moments is like, at the end when she's like, "Your ass is already on the line. Like, what are you gonna do about it?" Like, that's like a moment where it's like, all right, yeah, like this is the Ripley that we've kind of come to know and love, right? Like, who just kind of steps up and takes charge. But yeah, I think like that. Those are some valid criticisms. How about you, Adam? This is your second time seeing this, right?
Yeah, so apparently I've only seen the original cut of it because the differences. I didn't. Again, I've watched those movies forever ago, but when you point out the differences, especially that very last thing, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a completely different cut from what I've seen. So yeah, it's my second time watching this one.
First time with the assembly
First time
cut.
assembly. Yeah.
Do you have one that you prefer?
Um. Honestly, they don't feel that different to me. There are small differences,
Mhm.
but I don't feel the things that are added or taken away make that much of a difference. I might be wrong. You might be able to point it out, but like where it comes from is different. Where the alien appears from is different in both cuts.
Mhm.
I think the assembly cut is less upsetting for sure, but I don't think it changes. It doesn't change the design of the alien or the idea behind the design of the alien. And then the only other thing you're missing is them locking it away, which is cool moment, but then it's immediately undone. So it's like, did it really matter? And
Yeah.
then the chest burster at the end, which makes sense because it definitely would be overkill. And it's unnecessary because she's sacrificing herself. But also, yeah, they want to see that shot, and you never see that shot in this movie. So I don't think the difference. I don't know. They're both fine. I think I maybe prefer this one a little bit better, but I mean, barely, maybe. I don't know. It's not that different to me.
So it's almost a half hour longer, believe it or not. A lot of what they add is kind of around the character development. So you get quite a bit more with like the prisoners, and Clemens, especially like in the beginning. I think it fleshes out the world a little better and lets things kind of breathe. You're right, like narratively, like it doesn't like it's not like a drastically different like where it starts and kind of goes and where it ends like is all very similar. It's just kind of how that story unfolds, and I think it endears you a little bit more to like some of the prisoners who get a bit more screen time, and you get a little more context of stuff.
That might be true because I don't remember anybody from the first time. I don't remember any of the prisoners. I remember that they were on a prison planet. I don't remember them as a character. But this time I'm like, I can name people. I recognize the guy from Jurassic World 2 or Jurassic Park 2. And I was like, I don't
Yeah.
remember this guy being in the movie. So that might be the difference that I actually know who these guys are compared to not remembering at all who they were before.
Yeah, you just get more kind of banter and you see some of those interpersonal relationships, like both with and without Ripley, which I think is kind of a key to understanding like some of their motivations and things. Like, so cool. All right. It sounds like nobody disliked the movie, which is like that's good. A lot of people very actively. I remember like growing up and being a teenager, like are like, ah man, like the first two Alien movies are good, but three sucks. And even with the original like theatrical version, I never really felt that. certainly didn't like it as much, but I've come to really like regard this better and better like every time that I see it, just because like I said, with kind of get with some distance and time, like I think it was quite the bold film, and a lot of the stuff that it attempts. Great soundtrack too. Like when I was working today, I put on the soundtrack because I was trying to decide what piece of music I wanted to use for our title card for the episode, and I settled on something. But
Yeah, again, I don't remember. I only watched it by myself, so I had no idea that people didn't like the movie. I was just like, "Oh, cool! Now let me go on to Resurrection," because I was just watching them all from the torrent that I took whenever I was, 15 years old or whatever. Um, I could see people having an issue, I suppose, if they were expecting it to be like the first two movies, but I don't think it needs to be its own thing. But if they're like, "We're the Marines," it's like, well, this movie doesn't have to have Marines, I guess. Like, if that's what you were expecting, I guess I see why you'd be mad, but if you take that out of it, it's fine. I wouldn't be upset at this movie. I don't know why they were back then. So
I think people felt like they were kind of shitting on the characters, right? Like I know the actors, like especially Michael Biehn, was upset like that they kind of just like off screen like kill his character, right? Like who people, you got to think like 6 years, to of rewatches and all that stuff. Like people got really close to these characters and thought for sure that they were gonna be there for the next film, and I can see in the moment, especially if they manage to keep it a secret. This is pre-internet days. Like, if you're in the movie theater and you're expecting, like, okay, like, so there's obviously going to be like this conflict. Like, where's Hicks? Where's Newt? Like, how are they going to factor into this? Like, at least she's got friends along, and then suddenly, like, no, they're not there. But to me, I think it adds to her tragedy a little bit. Like, she's yet again like kind of back to square one. Like meeting new people. She's the only one that understands what's going on, and she's like now having to kind of she's isolated in a lot of ways. I think this movie kind of tackles like loneliness as a theme. Like there's a very lonely feel to this movie in a lot of ways, not just like with Ripley, but like some of the other characters, right? Like you can see they have this like almost like brotherhood on the prison, but like um not really a whole lot of affection, right? It's not an affectionate bunch. Double Y chromosome, as you said.
yeah.
These are serial killers and rapists and murderers and people that have done terrible things. So
It's weird for them to be upset at that. Just thinking that all of these movies end with Ripley being the sole survivor. Like Alien ends with her being the sole survivor, and Aliens they pick her up out of cryo. This is literally the exact same opening to the movie.
yeah,
Again, I like the Marines, but why weren't you mad that the cat didn't show up in this movie? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But whatever.
yeah.
think,
Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
I mean, the issue that I have with these movies is I almost feel like I mean, Ripley's a probably an iconic character, and I'm sure she's very well, like, very much loved. But my thing is, these three movies could have been three standalone movies that the only tie-in is the aliens and the race. Like these could have been issues that are happening concurrently after each other. So the issue that I have personally with these movies so far is that the only thing tying them in together is Ripley, right? From one movie to the other when it comes to continuity. So I feel it's very much like one foot in, one foot out when it comes to putting these together, right? If you're gonna have Ripley in all these movies, I would like to see more continuity from one movie to the next, like either other characters, more themes, more things that are a little bit more connected and related, to have more of that, like obviously this is way back in the day, but that MCU feel or like the TV series feel where they're kind of building on each other. But these are three very individual, three different quests, essentially stories that Ripley's happens to be a part of and finds herself in the middle of, and she doesn't want any of it, right?
There is one important thing that you're missing that unifies it, and that's Wayland Yutani, right? The company,
Right.
like
Yeah, yeah. I
Like,
mean, that obviously, like that's all going to be tied in, but it's very light. Like that's not what anyone's going to empathize with. Like that's not what people are going to connect with, right? It's going to be characters and here you had Bishop to an extent come out and play a role, and that
Cool.
I think was one of the strongest parts of this movie because let's face it, like you really don't really connect with any of the prisoners, and then the one person you do connect with, they kill him off so like nonchalantly, like it didn't matter. Like
The minute you like him, they kill him.
I hated his death. That is probably one of the things I hated the most about this movie. I hated his death because it was just so pointless, and the buildup was for nothing. Like it almost would have been better if they, like the stuff that he shared with her, like he shared it maybe as he's dying, or it does something to kind of like to help as he's dying. Like no, it just fucking goes out just like that, like it was nothing.
Good shock factor though, like that scene,
Yeah,
because it's a really touching moment,
it is, but I just, I don't know. It's just the movie, these movies lack continuity with each other that I think it could do a better job, or I wouldn't expect it as much if Ripley wasn't in all of the movies, if it was just three different stories and maybe Ripley comes back for another movie later. But, that's the part that for a franchise like this, I thought you'd see more of it from one to the next, but.
Nice. So, speaking of deaths, let's move into our categories here and talk. Who do you think has the best death in the film?
I mean, it's fucking is it Alan? No, the dude, the black guy, the
Dylan?
preacher guy, Dylan. It's fucking
Son of a
Dylan.
bitch.
So yeah, is that as hard as you can bite? You can bite harder than that, or whatever the fuck he was saying. Just fucking fighting him, goes out on his own terms, like a fucking
Barehanded,
G.
like
Yeah, just straight up. It just reminded me of like from the Friday movies, like you just live to fight another day, just these right here is all you need. He kind of goes out. I like his character too. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit, but yeah, best death kind of goes out like a G. You don't really see it, but you hear it. And that guy goes out fighting to the very last breath, which is a stark contrast to a lot of the characters in these movies and shows that just die screaming in agony and all that stuff. This guy was like, fuck that, like. So I that's the one for me.
How about you, Adam?
I mean, I'll go last because I got thoughts about the deaths in this movie. So you go ahead, Chris.
All right. Actually, like, it's not in the original cut. One of my favorite, additions to this is the rapist with like the tear drop. Kind of sacrificing himself to trap the alien. As we've pointed out, it ultimately like doesn't amount to anything in the long run. But I do think it's a great moment where he looks at Ripley. Like there's no spoken apology. There's just like a shared glance between the two of them, and it's like, like it's clear what he's doing and like why he's doing what he's doing. Like he needs to redeem himself. Like, and like he basically has the alien chase him into the room so they can shut it and close behind him. If they didn't have a psycho let the alien out, he's the hero, like he's responsible for, it's one last act of heroism. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that kind of adds some dimension, to that character, and it's a cool scene. He said, just because it's not gratuitous, like it's just a shared glance and just boom, it's not overly cheesy. It's just, I think it's well done. So that's probably the one I pick.
It's a good one. So I've actually thought about it. I don't know if they're my favorite deaths, but when the psycho guy lets it out and cuts the African dude's neck like he's a goddamn samurai out of nowhere, it's like, okay, that's what. But so here's my actual answer based on the alien is the first time that we see it, like as it's growing, and it spits in that dude's face and he falls in the fan. Because like, okay, that's a thing. That's really interesting, and he just gets cut up and his feet go everywhere. My main problem with this movie, and again, I don't hate the movie, so I'm not like, oh, it's awful, is that the first two movie, it's like a horror suspense and then like a horror action. And I don't think this movie is scary almost at all. No. And that also kind of goes into the way the alien acts. I love the way that it looks. I like that we get the lore of, hey, if it comes out of a different creature, it looks and acts differently, which I think is an awesome thing. But every death in this movie is basically either the alien grabbing someone by the head with its hands, or it like they go on the ceiling and then their like blood trickles down and their legs kick. Like the kills, like this alien is the least interesting killer of all the movies we've ever seen. And I think that and the movie's not scary, so it's like the alien's not even, I'm not worried about the alien. Like he doesn't do anything to make me nervous the whole movie. And I think that's kind of not good compared to the first two movies. Again, I don't think the movie's bad because of that, but this is the least interesting Alien besides the way that it looks, except for the CG, which is awful. But whatever,
Yeah.
it's in
Oh,
1992, so I don't like any of the kills. It's straight up, it's grab a dude by the head with like the puppet hands, or I'm in the ceiling, because it's always in the ceiling, and then like my legs are kicking. You're like, let me out, and then you're dead. Like that's literally 20 kills in the movie. It's just those two things.
I think
yeah.
the lack of connection with the cast of characters also cause, results in no buildup or tension, because you can have moments that aren't scary, but if it's a character that you don't like, you don't want to see him go out, like it kind of can add to that tension when they're being captured or being chased. And you don't really have that, you don't really care about any of these guys, they're a bunch of assholes for the most part. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of flaws with the movies, but
Yeah, I think, fatigue definitely sets in by the time you get to this, and like it's kind of apparent that like creative ways to like to kill and all that stuff, like there's not really a lot of shock factor left. Like this is our third, trip, on this franchise, like with this creature. So um
was this, I'm
yeah,
curious, was this planned? Because like, did they like when they were making the first one, did they have a plan of making this a franchise,
no,
connecting them? That's what it seems like, right? They made
yeah,
one movie. Oh, this is cool. Let's make another and another, and that's that's the difference between that and something like, obviously this is the time is different, but something like an MCU when there is a plan to bring these movies together and to make them kind of cohesive. And when you have something like this where you just keep spitting out different movies and hopefully that they stick.
And it's
it's
not even about being out of ideas, because again, the fan thing is cool. I like that the dude's holding it down to try to get the liquid on it. It's just there are so many others that it's literally I grab this dude, or I'm in the ceiling and he's kicking his legs. It's like that's I don't mind if, again, I know it's difficult to be creative. That's fine, but they literally do the exact same kill 10 times, and then they do the other kill 10 times. It's like maybe, and it's weird because like this alien actually eats people instead of just killing them. It's like he's sitting there chomping on them. It's like when when is this a thing? That wasn't a
yeah.
thing before. Just be creative. Again, you could have like the dude looks through the glass whenever they're closing the doors, and like the tail comes through. Easy. There's one. That's creative. That's different. It's just the same kill over and over again. So it shouldn't be that hard to make, or have less characters. Maybe only kill 10 prisoners, and you can be more creative. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, like the most creative thing they do, like around death and kills, is probably the accident with the fire, right? Like that's probably the not the most unexpected thing that happens, but the most unique thing that happens because it takes out a lot of the prisoners kind of all at once, and
Oh, the
it's
guys
like,
jumping while they're on fire.
yeah,
George's favorite scene in the movie.
yeah. Um,
I do
so
like in that scene how they show the it's either like the bucket or a tin can, like how it's super super hot, and then they put the water on and it breaks. I'm like, oh, good that they put that in there.
a little foreshadowing, yeah. Who is your favorite character in the movie, by the way? Another topic that we always touch on.
For me, it's still Dylan. That's kind of, I didn't want to get into it earlier with his death, but the reason I like him is because I think it probably would have been Tywin's character, but he went out way too seamlessly for me. But I like Dylan because he's the only character that is realistic with who he is and kind of come to terms with who he is. Yeah, I'm a killer. I'm this. I'm all these things. He finds religion, but like he doesn't excuse himself of the things that he's done. He's honest with himself and with everyone around him, and he kind of preaches that same kind of accountability with everybody. So it's almost like he's the only one who's not a hypocrite in that in that cast of prisoners, right? He's the one that like embraces everything and is more realistic. So there's a deeper sense of understanding, and if there's any character that maybe has gotten that salvation or that like has actually evolved to the point of redemption, it's really him, I think.
Yeah, his intro to Ripley is like, yeah, you don't want to know me, lady. I'm a raper and killer of women. Like,
Yeah.
that's a hell of a nice to meet you,
Yeah,
like,
he's
like,
like, yeah, don't come talk to me because I'm just the guy, the preacher, and you assume that I'm the nicest of this group. Like, this is who I am or who I was. This is what I am now. And it's make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I like it, and he's practical. He's authentic, right? When he says, "I ain't gonna fucking kill you. You're gonna fucking help us get rid of this shit, and then I'll kill you. No problem. You don't got to worry about that. I got no problems taking you out, but you don't get the easy way out of this. You brought this shit here. You're gonna help us figure this thing out." And in that moment, he kind of helps bring Ripley back to being the character that we expect her to be.
Yeah.
Without him, she probably does completely crumble. So he's a much more important character than it might seem, for sure.
Do you want to go next, Adam, or do you want me to go?
Yeah, I go. Yeah, Dylan is the best one, so I'll just go ahead and say George picked the right answer. I also like. Again, I don't remember how much character development we get between assembly cut versus normal cut, but I like 80. Is it 86 or 87?
God damn it, 85.
85.
Yeah.
Just because he's a joke and everyone gives him a hard time, but he does a really cool thing where he's turning them in. He's like, I'm getting off this planet, and screw all you guys. And then we get Bishop showing up, and everyone's like, that guy's an android for sure. And then 85 is like, you know what? This is wrong. Let me fix things. And he attacks him and busts his whole ear off of his head. And he's bleeding. And it's like, oh, he's not an android. This is really him. So 85, it's funny. It's a joke. But then he also gives us a really cool revelation that this guy's telling the truth, that he's like, Bishop is based off of me. I'm the real deal. And then we get that confirmation. And then just his ears hanging off the rest of the scene, which is great.
And the thing about that character too is he genuinely tries for a while to be a leader, right? Like he kind of gives up at the end, like he doesn't take part of the plan to trap it in the lead works, like at the very end. But up until that point, like even though like I mean, let's be real, like the guy, he knows that he's not the brightest like of the group, but he's the only other administrator there. He's not a prisoner. He's like one of two administrators that they left behind, and he tries to raise to the occasion, right? And like he does what a good leader like should do, which is like he gets diversity of opinion and he defers to Ripley. He does what his predecessor that gets fucking sucked up into the vent doesn't do, which is like he takes what Ripley has to say seriously and goes like, "Hey, yes, like let's what we're dealing with. Like I'm not going to fight you or argue with you. Like let's do it, right?" And like
he knows she's a priority and was like, "Yeah, I better follow." They say that she's special, so she's special.
And like he does a better job than his predecessor at leading arguably like handling the situation, despite the fact that he has a lower IQ. And yeah, it's funny that everyone kind of clowns on him, but yeah, I think he's sympathetic too, where like you totally get where he's coming from, where he's like, fuck this, I'm not going to have this thing chase me like into the lead works. Like I've got a wife and kids, they're fucking almost here. I'm gonna go sit in the office and barricade myself. Like y'all could go deal with that shit. Like you get where he's coming from, where he's like, this is above my pay grade. Like we tried, we fucked it up. Like the guys with guns are coming. Like let's just sit tight. Like little bit of blind trust that the company is gonna come and shoot it, but like yeah, I think
I was surprised they didn't kill him after he told them where they were. Like, when they start walking off and he just follows them, I was surprised they didn't just off him right then and there. Makes me wonder they might have saved him.
Yeah, I think they would have, like, because he's a company guy, right? He works for the company. And up until that point, he's compliant, right? Like he does everything that they ask him to do or tries to. And it's not until he assaults whatever bishops, like, that they shoot his ass. But yeah. So, God, you picked him. That was going to be my choice.
We picked the good ones. I know. I'm sorry, Chris.
I mean, okay, so the other obvious choice is Clemens, right? Like, even though he does have an untimely demise, like they do a lot to develop that character, and you like him almost immediately because he kind of trusts her. Like, he's like, I want an explanation, and I'll wait for the explanation, but like you're clearly upset and suspicious about something, so he kind of uses his gut. You can kind of see where he's like, all right, I'm going to do what she's asking me and like get the explanation later. Like, what's the harm in it? Really? Like, what's the harm in doing the autopsy, for example, or cremating the bodies? Like, and he kind of lets her come around to it in her own time to explain. And ultimately he's truthful, about like, he's a little evasive, but like ultimately he is truthful about why he is there. And his story is definitely tragic. And, it's basically a throwaway line, but like, when he says like, hey, like, I served my term and I was gonna go out, but when these guys decided to stay, like I decided to stay too, like, and he says I feel like I was let off lightly, like with his sentence, where he accidentally like wasn't responsible for the deaths of people that were under his medical care because he had was drunk or whatever. Like there are a lot of stuff that they do to really it is a shame that he doesn't make it longer because like they really do a great job up to that point, like developing that character and making somebody sympathetic and like yeah he's a prisoner but like he's not a violent offender. And like him and Ripley, I think like Sigourney Weaver and Charles Dance have great chemistry in the scenes that they're in too. Like, you know,
I love the whole like, hey, answer the question. They're like, how about you answer this question? He's like, how about I answer that question with another question, and then they sleep together. He's like, you
and she's
still
like,
haven't
how
even
about we
answered the
fuck? And he's
question.
like, word.
I love that whole back and forth. That's a good time.
Yeah. All right. So next we're gonna do what is your favorite scene in the film? Scene or sequence?
Man, it's I gotta go with something else. I don't want to keep going back to the to the well. Um, Probably favorite sequence or
If you need a
scene.
moment, I can tell you mine.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
you go. Let me get think about
Uh,
it.
so in either cut, like Adam pointed out, it is much more upsetting in the original cut. But the chest burster scene, I think, is great in both of these, because it's super or juxtaposed, I should say, against the funeral. And I love the way the speech kind of ties into what's going on, like what he's talking about with like life and death, and from every seed there's a new flower. Like like there's a lot of like imagery that kind of ties into the chest burster emerging. The original cut is a Rottweiler, and it's super sad because the dog is like whining and like crying and like convulsing on the ground. Whereas like in this, it's a dead ox in the assembly cut. So I agree with you, Adam. Like I much prefer the assembly cut version, but I think it works on both levels. It's largely the same kind of like motif that they're going for. The music's fantastic, and of course like the emergence and the reveal of the quadrupedal alien is fantastic. Oh, that reminds me, piece of trivia I forgot, the Whippet. They originally tried, you can Google right now, Alien 3 Whippet, like the dog breed. They originally had tried to put the alien costume on a dog, and that was going to be their quadrupedal alien, and it, surprise surprise, did not work at
It
all.
looks awful, but it is adorable.
It is adorable. But yeah, so that's my pick for sequences. Who wants to go next?
I do like the entire the metalworks, whatever that whole found, whatever they call that thing, foundry, whatever they call it, those scenes where they're going through, and they're like cutting it off, and trying to like trap the alien, and the whole thing with like putting the metal on it and all that. That entire sequence is cool. It's kind of ridiculous that they're running through these tunnels for 20 minutes, but it's fine. We get all the deaths right there, and it's just like, hey, do what you're supposed to do, bring it here, and like it's that little cat and mouse game that they play. That guy freaking out trying to pull it early. Again, him sacrificing himself to get all that lead dropped on him. I like that whole. I mean, it's basically the last action scene that we get in the movie. So I think it was cool how they did it, where it's like, oh man, some of these doors aren't closing. Got to go. Just do it, man. It doesn't matter. Do what you got to do. And I think that's a pretty cool action scene. Again, I don't love all the way the deaths go because they're basically the same, but I still think like the idea of that is cool and seeing this thing run back and forth. And like when he grabs her, because at this point we know it won't kill her because she has a queen side of her. And then when Dylan grabs her, like to pull her away and it freaks out, it's like, oh, it's going to protect her. So I like, I don't love the deaths in that scene, but I like how that scene plays out. So I think that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's a good suspenseful sequence, not because you particularly care or think anyone's going to make it out alive, but like you just want to see them succeed in their goal, right? I think that's where the suspense and tension comes from. So it works. Awesome.
Are
George.
we doing like are we gonna do a section for like new
Laura, yeah.
edition or something like that?
Next. Yeah, next.
Okay. Then this one's gonna kind of segue into it because it falls between the two. And that is the POV scenes with the alien when it's chasing people. Um it's probably the thing that I would like the most. It's also the coolest addition. Because I don't think we've seen, I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we saw a first person alien perspective in the other movies. Certainly
You're right.
not when not being hunted either. So,
No, you're right.
and then the fact that this one can kind of like run on the walls upside down, like Spider-Man style, I thought was kind of neat. And given that the movie is kind of lacking in scary stuff or tension, this is the most that it gets, right? The scenes in which they're chasing the prisoners, or the aliens chasing the prisoners in that first person perspective, especially as the doors are closing and he's trying to get through them, is the closest thing to any kind of tension that you get in the movie. So getting that perspective was cool, especially since this is like a quadruped, right? So you see it very low on the ground and the way that it's moving, almost like, yeah, like a lion or something like that. Um, yeah, and then being able to see it upside down, they do a pretty good job of that and getting that camera angle upside down. I thought that was pretty cool.
Awesome. So that brings us to favorite addition of like new lore or like world building. So what is your favorite addition? Like what does this movie add to the lore? And it adds plenty, you know. I think this is going to be a tough one.
I got a list, so I'll go last. So I know you guys. I don't want to take anybody, so I've got a list
That
already.
is my the addition that I like the most is seeing the I mean it's we've already talked about it, but like the quadruped with the first person, seeing the way that it's pursuing things, and especially given that we've come back from watching a couple Predator movies, was very curious to see how it sees and how it looks at things. So getting that first person perspective that you kind of get in the Predator movies, I thought was kind of cool getting it here.
Yeah, so I mean for me it's probably it's kind of kind of spoilery stuff for a future. All right, I'm not going to do that one. We'll come back to that when the time is right. There's one I was going to pick, but it would probably ruin a future film, so I'm not going to do that. Eh, I hmm. It's tough, man. There's a lot of stuff that they had. You know what? I'm gonna go with the fact that like we get more about Wayland Utani like as a company, like just knowing that they have like prisons. Like you kind of get like it's a small thing, but like you really see kind of the reach of the company, like beyond just like a shipping company or like a bioweapon like company. Like obviously there's such a conglomerate that they have like literally like a for-profit prison in other worlds, multiple ones. Like they mentioned like this isn't the only one. So I'd say that's probably one of my favorite details. And of course, like this all the stuff that you get at the end where you see whatever that character's name is, the bishop, like look alike, and all the guys that show up. So yeah, that's what I'll pick for mine.
So yeah, the Wayland stuff I always like, especially where that's the one of the through lines. It's either Ripley or Wayland or the alien is the only thing that stays consistent, and I like that we start getting more and more based on humans trying to do things with powers of aliens, which is always a good time. I like that we get to see sort of a midpoint in the alien's life cycle. So we know we get to check. I also like this that it can implant an alien baby into people or a queen, excuse me. Which because before we were like, oh, there's just a big one here. All of a sudden, it's like no, there's. I think whenever the guy picks up the face huggers, oh man, this is a big one, right?
That's
Whenever
new
he,
to the assembly
yeah,
cut. Yeah,
like the super big, like to get the ox or whatever. But Ripley has a queen inside of her, which is new because we never knew where that came from. You just like maybe one grows up. No, it's a very specific breed of one. And then we also get it at the halfway molting. I think that's what insects do, right? They molt when they
hmm
change shape.
yep,
Where when the dude gets spit on at the fan, it's not full size. I love it because it's like still white-ish and it's not fully black yet. So like it doesn't have its full last skin, but it's big. It's not still a little itty bitty crawler. So I like that it's like, oh, these things grow fast, but it's like, oh, he caught it halfway point. And also it spit acid, which is completely new too. So we get a little more of a some alien power things, and we get to see it in different stages, which is cool. And again, George, future spoilers. I'm not spoiling anything, but pay attention to acid stuff in future movies because it gets wild pretty soon.
it does. Awesome. Let me just double check my list to make sure. No, I think we pretty much hit everything. Like, so does it hold up? That's always the question we ask. And so we cover the CGI. Like that's bad. It's early CGI. It sticks out like a sore thumb.
It's very bad.
Um, any practical, like you can see behind me, like the anytime where they had like the puppets or like the suit, like way better. Like it's so stark. Like any sequence, I get what they're going for. They wanted to kind of show the movement and stuff. It just doesn't work. I don't think it really worked back then either. If I remember, kind of like seeing it for the first time, it's just it looks odd. It looks out of place. But that being said, like I mean, I once again love the set designs. I like the world building. This feels like a very believable rundown prison. I'm not sure where the fuck they shot this, if it's just a sound stage or if they did some location shooting, but really, really, really solid there. And if this were to be the last, Alien movie, and we know it's not, I think it's pretty successful. Like what it does this was always a satisfying conclusion, for me, like as a young lad before there was a resurrection. So, yeah, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think the movie holds up. I think it's fine. Like, it is a, it's fine movie. It's a decent movie. It's like okay. It has some good stuff, has some weak stuff, story wise, plot wise, but it is fine. And I think what it's missing, for a movie that has some weak story stuff, and development stuff, it's missing like Adam said, the scary, the horror aspect, some action to an extent as well. Because like you said, there's no weapons here, or they don't really fight it, and a little bit of and a lot of the deaths are off screen. So yeah, it's borderline like genre-less, because it's like I don't know. It's not really science fiction anymore. Besides just the alien, they're not really doing a whole lot of space. They're in the prison. It's not horror. It's not even survival that much anymore. It's just it's just a decent movie. It's a decent movie. You know.
Yeah, I really encourage you to seek out there's William Gibson's like version of like this script, which is completely different. It'd be like reading an completely alternate version. There's some, I mean, and his isn't the only one. His is like one of a couple of like versions of like this story that they tried to tell. I can't remember if it's his or somebody else's, where there's like monks, and you can kind of see where some of that made it over with the prisoners, but it was like an isolated group of monks on a planet, like and there was a lot of religious and like philosophical slants. And again, you could kind of see a little bit of the DNA of like where that maybe kind of like was like initially. um
We
and
kind of get
it's
that with that crazy character where he's like, it's a dragon. Like he thinks it's a religious figure. Is that kind of what they might have been going for in that script?
Gallic, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read it. Like, and some of the alternate scripts that I've read, like blur together. There was one where like it was an entire planet made of wood. Like, and I don't remember if I just like there was like some pages of that survived or what, but I seem to remember there like being like again like a big fire that happens in a planet that's made of wood. Like, not a great thing to happen. Just yeah, it's the production of this movie, I feel like, is as interesting as the film itself. Maybe perhaps more interesting because of kind of where it ends up. Yeah, I think you can see a lot of potential in some things that didn't quite pan out, but ultimately I like it. Like I said, I don't think it's the best movie, but I think it is like because it's so odd and it stands alone. Like this movie, I feel like you could show this to somebody, and yeah, there's like references to other stuff, but I think this movie stands alone better than Aliens. Like as far as like you could just watch this movie and understand like what's going on. Not as interesting or fun as Aliens or Alien, but um, it does feel a little bit like every time I watch this movie, I'm like, supposedly this is probably a few months that have passed, but this seems like post apocalyptic in a lot of ways, right? Like, and it's almost like she's at the end of time, and of course, like that's not what's happening at all, but it just has a weird tone. So, yeah, cool. Well, on the next episode, we'll be doing Alien Resurrection
Oh boy.
and our second round of rankings. So we'll be officially halfway through, and we're going to be watching Alien Resurrection, which I believe is 97. I'm saying that off the top of my head, so don't yell at me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think I'm correct there. And it's made by a French filmmaker known for like French art house movies. So Imagine what that could look like, George, and get excited. It's weird. It's fun at times, but fuck, it's weird. So I can't wait to watch that in party and discuss and do our next round of rankings, because it should be quite interesting to see where things kind of wind up now on the second round of it. So thanks for hanging out with us once again, and until next time, peace.
I fucking love Bobby so much. Jesus Christ.